For those of you who've heard one of my earlier messages this summer, you'll know that I've been doing two things. Firstly, I've been inspired by a question that the magazine Christian Century asked its contributors earlier this year. The question is provocative. What is the Bible for? And the task was made more challenging by a limit that was imposed. The answer could only be 7 words long. And then, as we think about this question and reflect on the answers, I also want to explore parts of the Bible that we might not often or ever read. After all, before today, how many of you knew there was a story in the Bible about a talking donkey? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 2 of those people have theology degrees. That doesn't count. And talking animals are very much a rarity in the Bible. There is, in fact, only one other talking animal. Does anyone know what it is? Did I hear the answer? A snake. Absolutely, right at the very beginning, the talking snake in Genesis. So we should pay attention to the donkey because he's not very common. And I believe that exploring the breadth of the Bible is important. That straying away from the well-worn stories that are perhaps so familiar, they've lost the power to startle or to teach. This can help us find God in unexpected places. This can help us see God at work in strange and surprising ways, so that we might remember to look more creatively for God in our lives. It can help us see the Bible, as the theologian Beverly Gaventa answered, whispering, confounding, amazing, never letting go. Gaventa continues, that preposition for provokes me. What is the Bible for? Since it reduces the Bible to an instrument, good or not, for some human purpose. My response pushes back against reduction. The Bible whispers God's way through story, psalm, law, letter. It confounds our claims to control God and creation. It amazes with its ancient newness, and it never lets us go, compelling us to read, listen, share, probe, resist, and praise. When it comes to today's reading, one part of Gaventa's response stood out for me. It confounds our claims to control God and creation. Such an understanding of the Bible is both active and essential. Active because it reminds us that we are part of something that is much bigger than ourselves, and that the Bible has a power and a purpose beyond serving our bidding, that it endures to challenge and confront us, not just to comfort and absolve. And then essential, because oh, how we humans love to be in control. And today's reading is most definitely about control. The passage comes from the book of Numbers. It's the 4th book of the Old Testament, and the people of Israel are wandering in the desert, seeking the promised land. But they're not there yet. And they have questions and doubts about just where they're going and what God has in store. And the Israelites aren't the only ones who are concerned. Neighboring kingdoms are alarmed at the growing threat that Israel represents. One such person is Balak, king of Moab, who decides that he needs to take action and have the Israelites cursed. So he calls for Balaam. Balaam is essentially a hired gun, except rather than tangible weapons, Balaam dealt in blessings and curses, and it's curses that Balak is interested in. He wants to pay Balaam to curse Israel. This is where our reading picks up the story. Balaam is getting ready to do business with Balak, and God isn't happy. So the angel of the Lord is waiting for Balaam to block his journey, even to kill Balaam. The only hope Balaam has comes from a most unlikely source: his donkey. The donkey can see the peril that awaits Balaam, and so does what donkeys do best. He digs his heels in, quite literally, and refuses to carry Balaam towards destruction. The most comical standoff ensues. Balaam is convinced that he knows best and that he should be in control. Yet even repeated beatings are not enough. The donkey will not move, and Balaam is left furious and powerless. It's not a good look for someone who purports to deal in divine power, but it's the inevitable consequence of ignoring God and ignoring creation. There's a lot here that spans the centuries and relates to our lives as well. Okay, except for the talking donkey. Although perhaps a talking donkey could be useful to command our attention, because how often do we ignore or neglect creation? I was struck by a news article this summer when a Toronto journalist decided to follow up on the condition of the Pan Am Games trees. Does anyone here remember the Pan Am Games trees? Do we remember the Pan Am Games? Back in 2015, when Toronto was hosting the Pan Am Games, 41 trees were planted along Front Street East to celebrate the countries and territories that were taking part. It was meant to be an enduring environmental legacy of the event. 10 years later, and the trees are not doing well. Journalist Matt Elliott calculates that only 61% of the 41 trees are still, quote, identifiably alive. Many are nothing more than an amputated stump. That's the fate of the trees for St. Lucia, Grenada, Guatemala, Barbados, Bermuda, and Bolivia. The plaque identifying Canada's tree is also missing, so Elliott can't be sure, but he thinks that tree is a stump also. And then alive. It's a low bar, not to be confused with healthy. Trees for the US, Peru, and Venezuela are malnourished, while the tree for Uruguay is nothing but a thin wisp, refusing to die. Certainly, our city has bigger problems than the condition of these individual trees, but I think they're also emblematic of our short-sighted attention span. We can so easily be distracted by the next new thing, the big project, the flashy idea. And we lose sight of the ordinary and everyday needs of showing up and caring, of keeping our promises and loving our world. All too often, we ignore creation, and in doing so, we risk ignoring God. We need stories in the Bible like that of Balaam and his donkey to steer us back on track, pun intended. As the historian and writer Stephanie Perdue puts it, we need the Bible to show us our foolishness and God's wisdom. She explains, the Bible illustrates the foolishness of our rivalries, self-righteousness, vainglory, and violence. Often we dislike biblical characters because we are like them. The Bible shows us ourselves. It interprets us. So understandably, we might laugh at the pointless stubbornness of Balaam, mistreating an animal rather than wondering what else might be going on. Human foolishness is certainly on full display. But that is only half the story. And if we focus only on that, we remain fools ourselves, still trying to reassert control of the narrative. There is much more to comprehend from this passage. We need also to receive God's wisdom. Balaam's story promises us that God meets us through creation, that God can rescue us through creation, if only we are prepared to look. God rescued Balaam through the instincts of a donkey. God reminded Balaam that God's presence and perspective were larger and wider than his human outlook. Or in Perdue's words, the Bible illustrates God's forgiving, wise love for us, which appears foolish because God is willing to weep, to cede power, to grant free will, to suffer for and with us, and to say from a cross, forgive. This wisdom overcomes our folly with grace. For two people living in a homeless camp in Pittsburgh, they were literally rescued through creation in the form of their dog. It was late July this year, and Gary Thines was playing with his dog in a local park when another dog appeared, apparently trying to get Gary's attention. The dog ran towards him, then stopped, just out of arm's reach. He barked, turned around and ran a few steps, turned back, and barked again. Gary recalls an overwhelming feeling that the dog wanted Gary to follow him. So he did. And the dog led Gary to a tent encampment where he found two people, both completely unresponsive and in urgent need of medical care. The police and ambulance services were called, and the humans were taken to hospital. Then Gary realized that the dog would now need caring for. Animal welfare could take the dog to the city pound, but Gary didn't think it was likely that the dog's owners could easily afford the fees required to recover their pet. So Gary took the dog home instead. As he wrote, "As someone in recovery from addiction myself, I know how important the unconditional love of your dog can be, and how much love they have for you, even at your worst. So it is an honor for me to take care of this guy until his humans are well enough to reunite with a dog that loves them very much. Unconditional love, caring for you at your very worst. God's commitment to see past our folly with grace. Or as Gary continued, this experience has been surreal, but it only reaffirms to me that God is real and he speaks to you if you choose to listen. And I'm so glad that I did. Now, events don't need to be quite so dramatic for each of us to find meaning and care in the natural world. For the journalist Emma McIntosh, creation rescued her from despair and discontent. She had moved to Toronto from the West Coast and was homesick, not only for family, but also for the sense of urban nature that she had enjoyed. Adjusting to her new surroundings was hard, and she began to doubt that she'd made the right choice. Until during the pandemic, Emma started going for walks more often and gradually began to notice the range of bird life around her neighborhood. On a waterfront walk one day, her curiosity was sparked by what she described as fancy-looking black and white ducks. Maybe you've seen them on the lake here in Oakville. They're called long-tailed ducks, and they spend their winters around the Great Lakes before heading to the far north in the summer to breed. Intrigued, Emma started to wonder what other birds she'd been missing. And as she puts it, turns out a lot. She reflected, I suddenly felt that I was actually seeing nature for the first time, like I'd been let in on a delicious secret. A whole new layer of the city had started to unfurl. The birds are a gateway to knowing the land Toronto sits on, and for me, to falling in love with it. This magic was there all along, but now I actually know how to see it. God's presence is there all along, and through creation we can learn how to see it. In creation, we learn how to see God. So with whatever you may need right now, what would it mean if you affirm that God is with you, and then look for places in the natural world where God is reaching out for you? Because when I watch a monarch butterfly, I remember that God guides our paths in ways we may not understand. When I need patience, I try to find a spider and watch her spin her web. A bumblebee inspires me to see that with God all things are possible. The stars in the night sky fill me with awe, while every sunrise renews me with hope. And the color and the call of a cardinal or a goldfinch bring joy and delight into my day. God's love and comfort all around us. So here's my answer that fits the Christian Century 7-word challenge. What is the Bible for? God with us in our complex world. And vitally, God being with us in our complex world is both story and promise. It is a story of our past, a light to find God in our present, and a promise for the future, a promise of joy, of hope, and of care from our God who loves us unconditionally and eternally. Thanks be to God.